Let's welcome Guy Branum!
Boo!
Good evening. Brains versus Brawn. It is a question that has plagued philosophers and mid-budget comedies since the time when the first big, strong hunter-gatherers acquired enough food surplus that their spindly associates had time to waste playing would-you-rather games and trying to rationalize some argument about how they were more important than their big, strong hominid buddies who were off subduing nature and having lots of good sex that lasted a long time. I will now address myself to this question. Let's begin by discussing my qualifications. I am a writer and comedian, Guy Branum. I'm a former Quiz Bowl champion. I got a perfect score on the LSAT. I can name every Canadian prime minister in order. And I once beat Ken Jennings in this trivia fight club thing that I belong to. I beat Ken Jennings. It's called Learned League, and Elena Kagan's in it too. I also have a very big neck. I am not conventionally handsome or fit or showing off my muscles like that guy. But I am quite capable of carrying a full ice chest long distances on my own and can, if necessary, overpower a medium-sized heifer. I understand Brawn. Let's define our terms. Brains is defined as the organ of soft nervous tissue at the top of the spine of vertebrates, coordinating intellectual and nervous activity, and is also defined as what you call it when you can see up the leg of a man's shorts and you see a little bit of his nutsack. Brawn is just defined as physical strength in contrast to intelligence, or alternatively is defined as meat from a pig or calf's head that is cooked and pressed into a pot with jelly. I would argue that brawn, by either definition, is better than brains. It is my considered opinion that while brains are nice and useful and helpful when you're trying to masturbate without a telephone or a laptop to help, they have always rested upon the broad shoulders of brawn. To contemplate this question, let us return to the cradle of human thought, ancient Athens. Athens was one of the first playgrounds of the mind. They invented drama, refined poetry, invented the study of physics, and formed one of history's first democracies, a government that rested not on who had the most force, but who could sway the greatest number of minds to their cause. Then they got involved in a little war with their neighbors, Sparta. Anyone remember who won? The dudes with abs, not the Scholarship Federation. The most intellectually advanced city on the planet got their asses handed to them by a city run by an oligarchy of personal trainers. They say that the victor writes the history, but those boys from Sparta weren't great at writing. The Athenians did write the plays and the books about the Peloponnesian War, but the Spartans fucking won. And a lot of high school football teams are named after them. And the rest of history has basically been a retelling of that story. Yes, the mind can create wonderful, beautiful things, like the skyline of Tokyo. But brawn can destroy what brains make. This may seem unjust to you, but justice, I would remind you, is just a newfangled invention by brains to justify why the powerful people who won the war or run the country are doing the right thing. You can whine all you like about injustice, but that doesn't really mean anything when the brute who pulled the spine out of your back is wiping his ass with your priceless art. Speaking of which, what did happen to the priceless art of Athens? Well, the Turks conquered them with brawn and stored gunpowder, the source of their brawn, in the Parthenon, and then their dumb, brawny asses let it explode. Then, to protect the treasures of the Parthenon, British Lord Elgin showed up with gunships and forced the Turks to sell the Parthenon marbles to him for the low, low price of not declaring war on them. Greece keeps demanding their art back through articulate diplomacy and at international tribunals and copious essays about the injustice of British holding their treasured colonial heritage. But if there are any members of the Greek government in the audience tonight, if you really want the Elgin marbles back, you might want to give up some of those essays and see what a ground invasion could do. Another ancient icon of the power of the human mind, The pyramids, a titanic combination of mental feats, planning, organization, engineering, and economics. They are a beautiful inflorescence of the capabilities of the human mind, which have stood for 5,000 years. And I ask you, which of these technologies was most important to making the pyramids? The answer is pulling. The greatest feats in human history. The pyramids, Stonehenge, the Moai of Easter Island, and the world's largest Canadian nickel in Sudbury, Ontario. All engineering marvels, and none of them would exist if you didn't have yoked hosses sweating their asses off. Yes, I'm sure someone invented amazing levers or pulleys or water displacement systems to amplify the power of our nameless brawny workforce, but without brawn, the engineering feats are just fantasies. Brawn makes things reality. You guys are probably like,
calm down with these oohs.
This may have been true in ancient times, but now through the power of science, we no longer have need for brawn. That is ridiculous. What does work for us in our modern age? Engines, powered by fossil fuels. And what is oil but the brawn of ancient beings rendered down to its explosive carbony essence? We may not use horses anymore, but we do have horsepower. What is electricity but a billion little electron laborers marching in line to illuminate our lamps and breathe life into our Alexas? Understanding how the sun works or using that knowledge to build a solar panel, sure, that's brain. But the sun itself, brutally smashing together and tearing apart atoms, that's fucking brawn. Kenice mentioned earlier this summer we had a blockbuster film about the power of brains. Oppenheimer tells the story of our government gathering together the greatest minds of an era, locking them together to build a device that would end a war and change history. Again, their work was brains, but all those brains did was figure out some math so they could create a bigger way to go boom. They didn't reason or think their way out of war. They solved a situation by destroying cities and lives. They used their brains to make one bully stronger than the other bully. Boom. The film, one might argue, does not celebrate the bomb. It celebrates the minds that created that bomb, or did it. This is Robert Oppenheimer, thin of neck, broad of brow. And to capture his cerebral life, whom did they cast? This smoke show. It's the oldest story in Hollywood. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, brilliant but mousy. We had to get Felicity Jones with that rack. There's been a lot of talk. Stephen Hawking. Yeah. Look at the abs on Eddie Redmayne. Syphilitic Shakespeare. No. Bring me that hot. What's Ray Fiennes' brother's names? Joseph Fiennes. When we think we want stories about the brain, but what we really want is hot bodies shoving up against each other. Because our culture is obsessed with brawn. We exist through a million-year-long process of evolution that was the result of people relentlessly hunting for the biggest shoulders, tiniest waists, and childbearingest of hips. Now we come to the question of the sapiosexual. Those who say they are sexually attracted to people based on intelligence rather than physical features. And to that, I say, poppycock. Those people do not exist, because if they did, right now there'd be a line waiting to get their wit-hungry jaws around my Ken Jennings-beating member to drain it of every philosophical musing they can pull forth. But men are not knocking themselves down to get to me. We have nothing right now. The gay guys in this audience do not care one whit about me. But if we ran down 8th Avenue to Wicked and brought back any of those flying monkeys in his dance belts, that is my friend Jeff. He is a professional flying monkey. And the gays in the audience want to fuck him right now. All right. Because human evolution may be the story of natural selection advantaging the development of the brain because of its advantages. The ape's point that, what was your name again? Sam. I'm not good at remembering. That Sam mentioned, but that's human evolution. What is human evolution? 100,000 years. All of evolution, every bit of it for hundreds of millions of years, hinges on the desire to get more brawn. Everything you do is just an attempt to get somebody built like a brick shit house to slam their genitals against yours. We want it because it's hot. We want it because it's fun. But what we don't realize is that the invisible hand of evolution trying to make us get the best genes for our descendants. We don't have to understand that. We just got to want that thing in our hole. The best example is a couple of years ago, I was on the subway and a member of the U.S. men's rugby 7 team. And earlier, Robin, you were like, oh, did football create a bunch of other sports? Yes, it did, like rugby sevens, and soccer. That's not my point. My point is I looked across the subway at one of them, and I was like, that's the correct genetic code. That man is the correct genetic code. I want that man to spill his seed inside of me so I can carry his strong babies. Only moments later did I remember that the kind of sex we would have rarely results in children. That's how powerful the genetic desire for brawn is. Gay men whose sex does not result in genetic reproduction are still the biggest body Nazis out there. We say we long for a mental or spiritual connection, but what we want is ass. And what is the ass but the brawniest part of the body? That said, as we briefly discussed before, automation and information technology have in the last 30 years redefined the world that we live in. Brilliant brains have built machines capable of doing things that we used to rely on humans to do. And of course, they would argue that I will argue that robots are brawn. Killing the younger version of a man who's eventually going to lead the rebellion against the robots is not an act of mental gymnastics. It is about riding motorcycles, shooting things, and being back. Those are all brawn. If you concede that robots are brawn, you will demand I concede that computers are brains. I do not. Computers are calculators, doing the intellectual grunt work of finding, tracking, and recording the information we need. Computers are our friends. They are doing work. Computers don't make decisions. Computers aren't in charge. If you want the soulless, non-human entities that have taken on the work of the brain, the executive managerial responsibilities of allocating resources and deciding priorities, we're not talking about computers. We're talking about corporations whose purpose is not to do work themselves, but find newer, easier ways to profit from the labor of brawn. What I am saying is, brawns of the world unite. This economy has convinced you that one day you might have the chance to be the brain ruling over all the powerful brawns, but every day it uses you for your brawn and denies you the use of your brain. But brawn is mighty, it is necessary, and most importantly, brawn is sexy. Thank you very much.